Good evening and a warm welcome back to the Supreme Petition here on KTN News, part 2 of a conversation that started at 8 p.m. And this show is your one-stop shop, literally, for everything around the petition that is before the Supreme Court. So at the deadline of filing presidential election petitions, 9 of them were filed. And if you've been following our news updates this evening, you now know that 7 stand. However, they've been consolidated, the Raila Karua petition being the lead and the others as part of that. 2 of them were struck out, that's of Moses Kuria and Ruben Kigame. The hearings commence tomorrow. You'll have the petitioners lay out their case, what their arguments are that are seeking to annul the presidential election and the election of President-elect William Ruto. And then on Thursday, you'll have the respondents have their day in court and they will come and respond to those issues raised. Friday, you'll have the rejoinders. That's when the petitioners get to come and then retaliate or at least give their thoughts on what the respondents will have said. The judges will then retreat for only 2 days because on Monday they must deliver judgment. The verdict must be out. It's the deadline. 14-day timeline expires on 5th of September, which is Monday. So we'll hear the Martha Koome-led Supreme Court deliver judgment. Will it be a nullification? Will they uphold the election? So this show is keeping you updated throughout. In case you don't have the whole day to watch all of those proceedings, then you can trust the Supreme Petition to canvass all of that for you. And this evening, the gentlemen advocates who have been with me throughout the evening, I have on my left Wilfred Nyamu. He is an advocate. So is Norman Magaya and Dr. Martin Olo. Gentlemen, thank you for staying with us here tonight. Long evening. Lakini nimewapatia chai.
We are not complaining.
You're not complaining. So I want us to get into the issues. As we mentioned, there were 9 petitions, now 7, but still those 7 had numerous issues raised as prayers for the court to determine. So let's take you through what are the 9 issues for consideration before the Supreme Court. This is how the judges consolidated the 9. Starting out there with the standard of technology deployed by IEBC, interference with uploading and transmission of Forms 34A, difference between Forms 34A uploaded, received at National Tallying Center, and those issued at 2 agents at polling stations. Then you have the postponed elections, suppressed voter turnout is another prayer that has been made. Remember, those elections were conducted yesterday, and we have the victors now known. Unexplained discrepancies between presidential election and other elective positions. IEBC carried out verification, tallying, declaration according to constitution is a question that's being posed to the court and is part of these proceedings. Then finally, the last 3 issues. Declared president-elect attained 50% +1 threshold. That's a question. Did he? Irregularities and illegalities that affected presidential election results, were they substantial enough as to overturn the result? And finally, relief and orders that the court can grant is another area that the court will be considering. So let's get straight to point number 1. I'll begin with you, Nyamu. Standard of technology deployed by IEBC. So we have a mix where you have part of the election, there are facets of it that has manual, and then the technological component. But technology appears to be an area that we keep facing all of these challenges. And so the standard of this technology will be interrogated. From what you've been able to see, because the petitions are out, the prayers, the arguments, the affidavits, what's your take on how this is going to pan out?
Basically, whatever standard is going to be looked at, there's one primary result. The little man in the booth. That is, at the end of the day, somebody went to the booth, they voted.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, whichever way you look at it, because there's a mixture of the technology and manual, and you cannot rely on one of them. At the end of the day, what will feature as important here is from 34S. What was the
physical form at the polling station?
Form at the polling station,
right,
as a primary source, is what will inform the decision of the courts.
Right.
There have been allegations that the portal has been interfered with, the transmission system was interfered with, and all that. At the end of the day, what Kenyans want to know is whether or not at the polling station, the results that came from the polling station are the same results that were transmitted to the National Tallying Center.
All right. And Martin, you remember there was this Smartmatic issue, the Venezuelans, prominent ahead of the election, and now all of these issues about that there was a lot of folks getting in there, manipulating and doing crazy stuff. I mean, how do we also get it right around this? That, you know, whether it's manual, there'll be issues, technology, issues.
So Sophie, we are in a bad place when you look at what we do for ourselves or what we do against ourselves as a people. Smartmatics, Analytica, very well known international meddlers, and they're on their own admission in Venezuela. They manipulated the election record in Venezuela. So when you are dealing with them and you saw the naivety or indeed the lack of due diligence that both Marjan and Chebukati displayed when they were discussing Smartmatics. So even as a country, for us to have allowed Smartmatics or any person from that kind of background to move near our elections, and there's evidence that they had every access and so on, way back in March. That is an issue. But let's deal with the issue of technology. What is the court? What is the Supreme Court going to determine? It's going to say, first of all, we have the KIMS kit. And our identification by law is by way of biometrics. But it can be supplemented with a manual register. So from the word go, my data is available in the KIMS kit just by my finger, just out of my fingerprint. So that is the first level of technology. But we have also said that in order to identify a voter, that's what we shall do. But to vote, we vote manually. So you are given a manual ballot paper to vote the president, the governor, the women rep, and so on. And then you put them in a ballot box. So that we have two technologies running concurrently. So we have costs that we're incurring for manual, we have costs that we're incurring for electronic, and then we have human interface in this whole thing. So the point is that when you have a technology, you need a standard, or you need to be sure that this technology is accurate, this technology has enough firewalls around it, and it's not easily penetratable. In other words, that it cannot be hacked into, nobody can do anything illegal with it except those who are authorized. So that's the equation that the Supreme Court will be trying to address itself to. Was the standard of technology deployed by IBC in 2022 one that can pass muster as per the Constitution? If not, then are the breaches therefore enough to call the credibility, the validity, the integrity of the elections into question? That's the question that is going to be canvassed.
Yeah.
For me, we are in a place where we just need to say the truth. We are spending too much money around our elections because of the various interfaces. There is the manual interface, there's the technology interface, and there's a human interface. My view would be that we actually can get a simple process. Today, I can sit here and send my people in the village money through the M-Pesa platform. In other words, that we can actually get a technology that works. Today, many clubs, many corporates, many publicly listed companies are doing elections from the comfort of their sitting rooms because we have the technology.
We print our money.
We print our money. But in this age, we still print ballot papers in
abroad.
Some third world country like Greece. Surely. We still print our examinations in the UK since independence. Surely. We must distrust ourselves that badly. And maybe we are right in distrusting ourselves, but when will we learn
how
to build
to, yeah,
our own trust?
And in fact, that's a big issue, Norman. And yet, you look at it in terms of technology and transmission of results, it's just the presidential election that you have the electronic component coming in, because for all these other 5 elective seats, it's manual outside of the KIMS kit identification. It's the counting, the tallying, and that's it. So did this layer for the presidential election then complicate issues? And how do you foresee us going forward as far as just ensuring we don't keep facing the same technology question?
First of all, Sophia, the use of technology in our elections has a historical perspective emanating from the Kriegler report out of the 2007 crisis.
Right.
So technology was introduced as an extra measure to reduce on fraud, electoral fraud and manipulation of results, and to ensure that you have a secure way of transmitting results from the origin, which is the polling station, to a tally center, and then you will simply do verification using the money forms. The framers of our constitution then did not leave it to chance, have gone ahead and defined for us the standards that we must apply in management of our electoral process. And that's why we have Article 81 saying that we must have an election that is simple, verifiable, accountable, and all that. And the question that you ask is that the technology we deployed for the 2022 elections, does it meet this criteria? Is it verifiable? Is it accountable? And if you test some of the components against the standards we've established in law, because Section 39 of the Elections Act is emphatic, and Section 39 did not originally come from the enactment of the Elections Act in 2011 after the promulgation of the Constitution. It took a protracted struggle to introduce these reforms through the Elections Laws Amendment Act in 2016 that then gave birth to what we have today as Section 39. It says you will, the presiding officer will electronically transmit the results in a prescribed form to the constituency tally center and to the national tally center.
Right.
Then you go back to the tests that the Constitution sets. Is this result verifiable? Okay? Can you verify the authenticity of the result? And if you go to the forms on the IEBC portal without delving into the evidence before the Supreme Court, they tell a very big story when you look at the components, the properties of those forms. Because the first point of comfort is that whenever you download any form, it's supposed as a basic component to show you that it originated from this polling station, it was created in this place at this time, okay, it was modified at this time. You are supposed to have that trail composed in the metadata of the forms. Now all the Form 34 is on the IBC portal. Deliberately, for a known reason, they have no metadata. It's all erased. So if you want an election that is verifiable, what will motivate you to erase the metadata? That is the DNA
So you're saying there's no footprint?
of a document. The footprint is not there.
How
And
do you
this,
know
and
this?
anybody, you can download those things are on the
It means
portal.
an allegation.
As
It means an
Chebukati has
It
been
means an
saying,
allegation.
no,
Yes.
I'm a diligent citizen. It's an allegation to a dormant citizen, but I'm not a dormant citizen. I'm a diligent citizen. I operate in an atmosphere where I don't have absolute trust in IBC, so I have to check the four corners whenever I receive an electoral result. So is that form verifiable? Is
But
it?
the
Is it?
footprint
No, let
would
me.
be at the back end. It's not something you'll access and see
yeah,
everyone else in
yes,
the world.
No,
right?
no, these things are on the portal, Sophia, and Chebukati has been saying, go to the portal, interact with the forms, to quote him verbatim, interact with the forms
That is
on the
true.
portal, and I've taken absolute liberty to interact with the forms. I'm only sharing, and this any Kenyan can check. Secondly, is that the system is supposed to be efficient, okay? Efficient in the manner that you capture a result, that result is transmitted timely, and it's available in the public portal, okay? Now, those forms attached there, again, tell a different story. You have forms that take up 1 hour to 5 hours to get to the public portal from the time they are created in the KIMS kit. Then you wonder, why are these forms taking 5 to 6 hours? IBC is using a dedicated VPN network to transmit results. The third thing you get with this results transmission is that the general election regulations and the minor KI case make it very easy in the manner in which you manage election result at each stage. There is a protocol for everything. That's why if a voter cannot be identified biometrically, there is a protocol on how that voter can be identified manually. Now, the KIMS kit, and from the specification right from procurement, IBC said that KIMS kit will only take one photo of the Form 34A and transmit, and after it is done, it cannot take another. So where is then the protocol provided for where a Form 34A uploaded is brought down and another one uploaded? And who is doing this? Because if you follow the principles laid down in law, is that the form created by the presiding officer at the polling station is final. So if it is not the presiding officer changing, who is the law mandated
So in essence,
to change this?
what you're saying...
So where did somebody derive this power to bring down and upload a fresh Form 34A? So those are lingering questions, which then when you test against the principles prescribed in law are problematic. Above all, my theory is that the entire election interference manipulation is a project that was actually conceived and properly executed. From procurement, that's where the process starts. That's how we go to Smartic. That's why we go to how we go to this Greece company.
Okay.
That's how you are being told, people are being told overnight that ballot papers are arriving tomorrow. It is not by coincidence.
So
and the nature of the operation that is undertaken to arrive at what we have now is something that has taken vigorous preparation. So much so that what we have in 2022 is not hacking, is access granted by the Commission.
Allegedly. So we wait.
You will have time to respond. You will have your time. You will have your time. I'm only sharing my views as a diligent citizen who has taken trouble to interrogate the results, the voting process, the results transmission. And I think I have an inherent right to share my views. Again,
we're not litigating the matters here, but you have, of course, a right of opinion. And that actually goes into then the second ground for determination or issue, which is interference with uploading and transmission of Form 34A, which is what then you're saying you believe there was. Your thoughts around this technology and the standard deployed?
Well, my take, and I still insist, is that at the end of the day, and even as a Kenyan, from where I stand, I still insist that some of these wild allegations and allegations based on hypothesis and speculation are only meant to erase from Kenyans what happened on the 9th of August and what was actually declared on the 15th.
Okay.
At the end of the day, we all know where to go. The electronic system and all that. And that's why there's a blend between manual and electronic system. So that now you find that at the end of the day, if you are in doubt as to what really transpired, you have a place to go.
The physical.
And that's why you go to the physical Form 34As. And that's why actually even today from the scrutiny, the application for scrutiny brought out a few polling stations. These polling stations, of course, were reviewed by the Supreme Court, assessed, and where the basis was laid, 15 polling stations only were given as the polling stations from where now physical copies were to be checked, and Kenyans will see from that. And I'm actually not. I'm confident that even me, I want to know. I want to see whether what the Form 34As that are in those ballot papers are what is in the public portal. That's all I want to see. And
Martin, the result path is something that the IEBC, even before the election, those during the simulation exercise and subsequently, released a statement on the path of the results. From the moment you go in there, you vote, polling closes, counting of votes, and the subsequent processes. So two things here that are related. The second area and issue of dissemination, and the third, where the second is whether there was interference, which Norman submits as a diligent citizen, believes there was, and so have the petitioners laid out their case. But the third point speaks to differences between Forms 34A uploaded the Forms 34A that were received at Bomas, which is the National Tallying Center, and those issued to the agents at the polling station. So these are the three things then the Supreme Court will be looking at, right?
Yeah, I think, Sophie, I would like to suggest that if Mr. Nyamu believes that what is being said is speculation, allegations, perhaps even the Supreme Court would not have been moved into the seriousness of the 9 petitions as to come up with these standards, the issues that it believes have to be determined. We do have a constitutional mandate and a constitutional provision to be lived by, to be complied with. If compliance was there, we would not be where we are. So the questions as to compliance are out here. Did IBC perform according to the expected constitutional requirement? Those questions are here. The issues you're raising about was there any interference between Form 34A as uploaded at the polling station and subsequent entries? I like, the fact that Mr. Chebukati has told us, interact with the public portal, everything is there. In fact, I love the fact that he thinks that transparency through the public portal is the only way that he can insulate the IEBC from culpability. That's a good one. The beauty about it is that it has given anybody out there with an opportunity to go onto the World Wide Web to actually interrogate what happened here. And there is a report by University of Michigan professor Maben, who has looked at our 2017 elections and has looked at our 2022 elections and has come to one conclusion, that there were massive frauds around transmission, around uploading, around downloading, and around alterations. Now, the report is out. It is already published. It's dated 27th of August, and it has massive data around it. Now, of course, somebody can say that is just a report, a view by one person. Maybe there are other views. No problem. The fact of the matter is that we do have allegations made, or we do have affirmations in sworn affidavits, which are of course subject to rebuttal and therefore subject to determination by the court as to whether Form 34A has uploaded onto the portal, and not even onto the portal. From the perspective of a KIMS kit, what was supposed to be transmitted from the polling station is a JPEG format, which is a photo of Form 34A. From some of the evidence that we are seeing in the affidavits, the Form 34A as uploaded is in a PDF format. It immediately calls into question why this alteration or why this aberration. So there are issues to be investigated, and perhaps for the court to determine whether there is consistency between what is produced from the KIMS kit and what is in the public portal are similar products.
But here is the thing.
Yeah.
Let's say, granted, there were issues, infiltration, folks doing all kind of monkey business with the forms online, with the portal, everywhere else. The Form 34A, the physical one, is put in the ballot box after it's closed, right? Before it's sealed, it's put in there. One is on the door of the polling station, right? And then there's one uploaded, and there's the physical one that is brought to the Bomas. If a case is proven around all of this interference and mess, however, the physical Form 34A remains unimpeached. Can an election be annulled just because there's a technological mess, but the physical one?
You see, Sophie, I wish it was as good as you're putting it. As long as the basis upon which computation tallying has been done is on an altered document, the point you're making is that it only takes a scrutiny or takes a court of law to order.
That's why I'm calling it hypothesis.
And you'll come to it. I'm not talking about hypothesis. I think at this point, in terms of law, we don't theorize. We simply produce evidence and show the connection. So I wouldn't talk about hypothesis. I'll do that in an academic environment. Basically, what we are saying is that Form 34A as uploaded, there are physical forms that, as you've just rightly described, that eventually find their way to
Correct.
Bomas, which is the National Tallying Center. Nobody is asking whether or not those forms came. What we are saying is, can you scrutinize? That's what the court is saying. Can you check whether these forms tally with what you have? Because the scrutiny is opening up the ballot box, checking the veracity of 34A inside that ballot box, checking the number of votes in that ballot box, whether they tie up with what is in Form 34A as declared or not. Now, as long as there will be discrepancies, as long as there will be alterations, if that is present, then we basically are saying that the elections did not happen according to the constitutional.
Because this is the other thing, and I'll bring this to you, Norman. Up to the election result was announced on the 15th, right? Up to the 14th, from end of voting day, right? After the Forms 34A began to arrive at the Bomas of Kenya, that's what was going on. The process of the physical has arrived. This is what we've received and seen from the system. And yet, up to that point, did you see valid, real issues raised regarding the discrepancies?
Sophia, you need to know that the issue of manipulation and interference with the 2022 presidential elections did not start with the rejection of Raila's statement of the results.
Right.
Okay? For those who are following events and understand the conduct of presidential elections in this country, we had already seen problematic issues in the manner issues were being done. And I think the major thing that sets me apart from my learned friend with his hypothesis and theory is that I have litigated and I have run a presidential election in this country. I speak with a measure of experience and authority. When you're dealing with the technology and the issue of alteration of forms, the argument that the form in the box is it the same with what is at Bomas, assumed that technology is optional in the conduct of a presidential election. To the contrary, technology is mandatory in the conduct of the presidential election, and the apex court in this country has nullified an election on the basis of the manner in which results were transmitted from the polling station to the National Tally Center. Secondly, the law requires that computation of results from 34B to 34C is a manual process. 2022, it was not a manual process. Smartmatic were doing tallying of the votes. Okay? This is not a matter that is in private possession. It's a matter of public notoriety. These affidavits are in court.
Okay.
This evidence has been provided of what exactly was happening during the process. It's supposed to be a manual process.
Yeah.
We have a system that has been developed to alter results. 3, your argument and Nyamu's arguments belittles the magnitude and the investment towards electoral manipulation that happened in 2022. This process did not happen at Bomas only. Remember Chebukati's unilateral appointment of returning officers in March and the transfer of others. Okay? That list is also a matter of litigation in the Supreme Court at the moment. So much so that presiding officers hand over everything to the returning officer. Only the returning officer then speaks to what he is bringing to the National Tally Center.
So let me ask you this.
So what you are being fed is you're being fed an altered form that has been reverse engineered to also be delivered, and you end up with the same product. So much so that those who have attempted to tell you what Chebukati has put on the public portal completely miss the point. 4th, I spoke about the DNA of a form, which Martin has raised, that this thing is supposed to be JPEG. Okay? Conveniently, they were converted to PDF to facilitate alteration because it is easier to alter and manipulate a PDF document, which is what they did. Secondly, departed from what will have been the norm, that you will take a photo that is colored and provided a provision for the transmission being in monogram, black and white, which then facilitates alteration, okay, and diminishes the chance that you will be able to note that these forms have been altered. Above all, these forms that Chebukati has put on the photo, download it, go to the properties of the form. Tell me if you will see anything. What then is the motivation for alteration of the data? Lastly, Form 34B is supposed to be generated at the constituency and signed by the returning officer, uploaded and delivered. 34 of those forms have the same file name, same username, generated by the same machine. That information is on the public photo. Generate that form, look at the properties, the rear of the form. You get this information is available. Then you raise the question. Okay, does this form meet the criteria that the law is that the law requires? Above all,
yes, you have
these forms are a repository. Listen, these forms are a repository of how Kenyans express their will to choose their president.
Your point is made.
The manner in which you transmit that decision, so much that we have a decision of the court that stands until now, that election is not an event.
That is
it
true.
is a process. And how you conduct each stage of that process affects the final outcome.
So then let me ask you this, Nyamu, to that point, because he makes a good point that the technological component in our elections is not idle. It is not one that can be rubbished or say there's the physical form, so it's okay if these other things don't add up. So I've heard lawyers sit here with me and talk about the qualitative and quantitative aspect of a petition. So that qualitative then is speaking to the quality. So if all these other issues of technology, it is grounds to, and now, which we saw in 2017, quantitative is, there are all these issues, but does it change the will of the people? What is your thoughts around that?
My view is that, first of all, what I want to say is that, my comment is that the election transmission and the election process in this country involves a blend of the two systems, electronic and manual. And verification, that's why there is verification. And that's why you asked a very good question. It took from 9th to 14th, there are no issues, because there was verification being done, tallying and verification, where the electronic device would show this. As the constituency returning officers brought their forms, verification would be done to ascertain as to whether what is appearing on the electronic system is what is on the manual. That is Form 34A. And that's why it took so long, as agents at the National Tallying Center were actually very keen and vigilant, and it took so long. Now, the problem arose, and it was actually quiet and very peaceful. The problem arose when it became apparent who the winner was on the last day. That is when now eyebrows were raised. But otherwise, all through, there were no issues. And the animal in the room, let me finish. The animal in the room.
There was a night, actually, there was a scuffle at the
tallying center.
What I wanted
Mr. Nyamu at the tallying center, the problem,
and this is the question, is whether he is an insider or an outsider, because then we can interrogate him. Because what he's saying is like he knows what was happening between all that time before that. Can you declare whether you are conflicted or not? Because then we can tackle you.
Yes.
Because the way you are speaking, you are like you are
sitting
inside.
on the fence.
I'm not conflicted at all, but I'm a Kenyan, and I was also watching what was happening. That we had a very peaceful time where all the commissioners were actually participating in the exercise, and verification was being done. We were seeing constituency returning officers queuing as they were actually submitting the results and everything, and it was peaceful. It only became a problem when it became apparent who the winner was, and actually that was I remember I saw somebody say that this place has become a crime scene, and that was on the 15th itself. That was on the 15th.
No, the first time he said that, I think the only time he said that was before, actually.
It was before the declaration.
It was when he went on stage.
And that was on the same day the results were declared. But And that was on was it on Monday? It was on a Monday.
It was in the between, before, it wasn't on the 15th, that I remember, because there was still some drama before the announcement. Remember the gadgets in the middle there, someone
Actually,
flying?
that day was characterized with drama.
Nyamu is missing the point. He's only reporting what he was able to see.
No.
We need to report holistically what happened from the night of 9
at the end
to
of the
15.
day. At the end of the day, what
No,
I'm
no,
saying,
Nyamu, we will not spend time dwelling on your selective amnesia.
Let me finish. You have your time. At the end of the day, and here we are.
Yes.
There was verification. The verification was done.
Okay.
And
can you speak to the issue of verification? I think there's some sweeping statements we're making here.
When the Form 34 when they streamed in.
When the Constitution talks about verification, what does it mean? Because you want to make a sweeping statement on a national TV, and you are a lawyer, because verification is exactly the issues we are dealing with. What is verification? Verification is take Form 34A, compare it with 34B,
yes,
and generate 34C. And that process is done as per the Constitution. There is a process leading into even the Commission adopting, as a Commission, that. And that's what the court said in 2017 amounts to adherence to the Constitution. So if you say there's verification, what do you mean?
Verification entails looking at the Form 34A as it originated from the polling station, the physical copy, as against Form 34B generated from the constituency, and then brought to the National Tallying Center, together with the electronic with the results as they streaming into the portal, and having a blend of all those. And then once such verification was done is when now Form 34C would be generated.
Have you seen any minutes from the IEBC that authenticates what you've just said? Are there any minutes?
Clearly not, because we saw the dissenting commissioners
No,
come out.
And what he's giving us is a textbook definition of verification. Actually, that is not the standard established in law that governs elections in this country. That is Mr. Nyamu's standard.
Gentlemen, this is clearly an issue. We shall not turn ourselves into the Supreme Court.
Actually, you better watch.
No.
We shall see starting.
Mr. Nyamu, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you are defending electoral fraud. Period.
And we shall see who will be vindicated at the end of the proceedings at the Supreme Court on the matter of whether there were changes, differences in the Forms 34A uploaded and all of that. The fourth ground issue of determination before the Supreme Court, as we heard today, postponed elections, suppressed voter turnout is a prayer that has been made. Now, we saw those elections, the repeat held yesterday. Today we have the results, especially Kakamega and Mombasa counties were the ones in contestation. And Norman, I'll bring this to you because the argument is that this is a stronghold of Raila Odinga. Do you still hold that such a position if you indeed held it before, going by how the presidential election, even as contested as is, how the results panned out? Let's begin with Mombasa and how the gubernatorial race panned out today.
I think to analyze that, Sophia, you need to look at the psychology and mind of a Kenyan voter today. Other than the presidency, the governor is the second most important position to Kenyans.
Right.
So far as positions of governance affect their day-to-day life. Okay? And it has a big component in voter motivation. So much so that other than the presidency, the other position that will attract voters to turn up on the election day in their numbers is the gubernatorial position. The second issue is that you had months to procure ballot papers. Okay? It is so appalling that you only make a discovery on the eve of the general election that you have mixed up ballot papers for 2 counties. And 2 counties that, out of perception, are counties that have, and based on previous performance, because that is the only benchmark that you use, the last result. And the last result was 2017. These were Raila's strongholds. Okay? So it raises curious questions. Why that will happen in the 2 electoral areas, okay? and most strangely for the gubernatorial position. Okay, ultimately the voter turnout in Mombasa was around 45%, the lowest. In 2013, the voter turnout in Mombasa was 65. In 2017, it was 68. You have a 20% drop. You can attribute other factors, but the only glaring thing that happened in the 3 election cycles is that for the first time, the election of the governor was not being done on the same day, the election of the president, which is the first evidence you will use to analyze the drop in voter turnout. The same thing with the Kakamega, okay? And all this was being done with an eye on 50+1. How do you deny your opponent the chance to maximize? Because this election was also based on how well voters turn out in areas that you are strong. I will not address myself to the results Chebukati declared because I have my own conclusions on the results for Mombasa and the results for Kakamega.
But I wanted to speak to this issue even as he goes on. There is a step back on the issue of suppression. In Mumias West constituency, for example, more than a third of polling stations did not have functioning KIMS kits.
That's on 9th?
On 9th. And up to 11, up to 12, up to 1 o'clock, when a decision was made that now a manual register be used, voters who had come and turned up ended up going back home. So they came back later. Some polling stations closed at 5, some closed a little later. There was no standard around it. Obviously, when we followed up, we found that the SD cards that were meant for those KIMS kits went elsewhere. So they were found later on from other parts of Kakamega and other parts, because then they were not loading because they were wrong SIM SD kits. That's number one. Number two, when the gubernatorial ballot boxes were opened for inspection on 8th, not on 9th, it was discovered that the gubernatorial materials had these kinds of markings on it. It was Kakamega, Mumias West, and then there's a polling station. And then when you open the booklet, it's the booklet. When you open it, on top it says Kakamega, Mumias West. When you open it, you find the candidates are Kirinyaga gubernatorial candidates. The question I ask and I pose on this table is whether you know anywhere else where the materials for Kirinyaga were found. Because these materials that were in Kakamega were actually Kirinyaga materials. Did you ever hear anything that the Kirinyaga materials were found elsewhere? So if you were looking for evidence that there was a deliberate effort to then suppress or to then discourage voting, then you can ask, where were the materials for these other counties? Now, if you find out that there were extra forms 34A that were printed, the question is, since these were not available at polling at the constituency level, where else were they available? And therefore, the question that turns up into play is that could there have been extra
I'll respond to those
ballots?
issues.
Yeah, you seems to be an insider, so
No,
you respond.
I'm not an
Yes, I have
insider.
no problem.
You seem
Because
to
here I
have
am.
your own,
I'm
perception
raising
of
issues,
things.
but he has
From where you
answers. So
come.
I will then pin him to give me the
All
real
right,
answers.
let's hear the
Yeah, I will pin him.
answers.
You see,
Go ahead.
one of the things is that we have this perception in Kenya.
No,
That
not
whenever-
perfect. I'm
whenever
saying
anything
no.
happens,
Wait.
we say money has been poured.
Nyamu, I have not talked about money poured. I've told you. Tell me where materials for Kakamega were found, because we found Kirinyaga in
One of the
Kakamega.
things that I'll tell you,
I will.
when you look
Let
at the
him
law,
Just before you go,
No,
just
if
before
he's
you go, because
defending
I want
him,
you to, I want
defending
you,
him.
I want
No,
no,
Not that
Sophia,
this is the
Sophia.
Supreme Court.
No,
There is a very important point. He says, I will respond to
Yes,
all those
yeah.
issues. In which capacity?
In which capacity?
Let him say, I will give my view.
as a Kenyan,
No.
I'm giving you
Speak for IBC.
If you
tell
speak
us
for IBC,
where
tell us.
materials for
Gentlemen,
Kakamega
If
appear.
you speak for Kenya Kwanza, tell us.
Let him
First of all,
let him speak.
First of all what we are saying.
You want to answer that?
No.
I'll respond also.
No,
It looks like you're coming from a place of authority.
Not a place of authority. I've also come from a place of information because I'm also a Kenyan and I've seen issues unfold. There are so many factors that have actually occasioned what happened, postponement of election.
Okay.
And even the law itself, Section 55B of the Elections Act, actually was enacted because it was the legislature saw a situation whereby there is a possibility of postponement of an election in certain areas based on certain circumstances.
All right.
For example, when you look at Mombasa and Kakamega, those two places were actually characterized with with legal battles during this electoral period, towards the election. One, you look at the Sonko gubernatorial issue at Mombasa.
Mm-hmm.
There was a court battle. In fact, I was I was his lawyer in the Mombasa case, where even as late as 15th of July, it was not clear whether Sonko was going to run. And it became apparent even after 20th of July. So ballot papers for Mombasa gubernatorial were actually ordered late owing to that. The same case applied to Kakamega. There was also this issue of Malala. It was a legal battle.
The issue of Malala.
No,
wait. At
when
what
you
point?
look at
Mr. Nyamu, you'll not get away with statements. At what point was Malala's issue? Before nomination or after nomination? Before, was Malala cleared on his first appearance at the IBC?
All right.
Was he?
Those are issues. And remember,
wait a minute.
I
Mr. Nyamu.
Yes.
Was Malala cleared when he appeared before IBC? The
I
answer
remember.
is yes.
I remember one thing.
The answer is yes, he was cleared.
So it never interfered with the process.
I remember one thing that happened.
Let him
I
You're
remember-
clutching on straws, boy.
No, nothing.
Let him
I
finish.
remember
Yes.
Chebukati saying that where there are legal issues,
No.
they'll not haste in printing of the ballots, ordering for printing of ballots. Remember, and actually when you look at
answer me straight
Hold on.
questions,
No, no.
I'll
So
accept.
you have
Was
in your
Malala-
view.
and in
Was
my
Malala
view,
cleared the
it is
first time he
some
appeared
of those
before IBC?
circumstances.
And
and it is not-
Martin, if
it
the
is
issue
not-
was Malala's legal
No,
predicament,
I'm
how
it's
do
not
Kirinyaga
Malala
papers
only.
find themselves in
I'm trying to
Kakamega?
explain
Okay.
and
How?
you guys are bombarding
How?
me.
Norman,
I'll
Martin.
respond to issues.
Let him
respond to
finish.
the
Let
second
him have
issue
his
that I'm
time.
going to
But
deal
we
with.
can't
Yes.
accept.
And that's why it's speculative and based on
Yamu has no
hypothesis.
local standard to respond on
One,
anything.
When you look at the voter turnout in Mombasa and Kakamega, one of the issues that you may want to look at when you say that Kakamega and Mombasa were characterized with the low voter turnout because of that postponement, look at Vihiga.
No, you see,
I'm asking you to compare
We have issues with
Kakamega voter
We are
turnout.
dealing with Mombasa
we are
and
dealing with
Kakamega.
You have to look at the neighboring counties.
No,
You have to look at the
asking
voter turnout
a
in the
question.
neighboring counties.
Okay, give us the turnout for Vihiga 2013, 2017. Give us so that we compare.
I'll give you
Well,
Vihiga 2017 and 2022.
Stop spinning.
Vihiga
Stop
2022.
spinning
He's
sphere
answering-
pegs
he's
into
answering
round
your
Your
holes.
question, my friend. Don't
He's
get
answering
irritated
your
here.
question. Yeah, this is.
Yes, you thought people would not understand
by
what's
now.
happening here.
What was the turnout?
Actually, the turnout in Vihiga itself was 50-something% in 2022, whereas in 2017 it was 73%. Go to Kilifi. So that is voter turnout, and in the Vihiga elections were held as normal. Go to Kilifi. Kilifi had 48%.
I don't think Kilifi is in play.
No,
We are talking about
Kilifi is
Kakamega.
neighboring Mombasa. I'm trying to say
He's
that
trying
voter
to do a
turnout,
comparative, at least
comparative
that's my
analysis on
take
voter turnout.
of the region.
Kilifi
Okay.
had 44.84% this time, and in 2017 it had 65%. So basically, this voter turnout was not occasioned only by postponement of elections. It is just a natural occurrence. And again, you cannot say that this is where I'm stronger, and that's how. If we are strong, if Raila was strong in these areas,
All right,
people would
gentlemen.
have come out to vote for him.
So,
Gentlemen.
He cannot rely on a government.
Sophia,
We have 10
postponement
minutes.
of elections, Section
Yeah.
55 of the Elections Act.
Right.
The grounds for postponing an election. there is reason to believe that there is a serious breach of peace likely to occur if the election is held on that date. It is impossible to conduct the election as a result of natural disaster or other emergencies. See, that there has been occurrence of an electoral malpractice. We are talking about a commission that had 2 years to prepare for an election on the 9th of August. IBC did not wake up on 8th of August to conduct an election on 9th.
Actually, errors in the ballot papers was an occurrence.
You know,
Your argument, when people interrupt me, it is an occurrence that actually ballot papers
your arguments, even if dressed in Sunday best, they don't make sense.
Okay.
They are a flaw.
Okay, we are back to order.
Let us come back. That one we shall now wait. Supreme Court will be the theater of all these arguments from clearly this Supreme Petition show. But there is another issue I want us to quickly look at. Our time is about out. But unexplained discrepancies between the presidential election and other elective seats. The argument that in some instances, Martin, we saw a presidential candidate receive way more votes, and it was unclear how then there are certain individuals who came in, got all the 6 ballot papers, because that you must get upon arrival, but only cast one. And what about the other 5?
And that is a valid question. And again, so that I avoid Mr. Nyamo trying to prosecute for IBC, it's a question that is being raised in the Supreme Court. And what is it informing? What is it going at? It's going to the heart of the issue, that is there a demonstration that there could be certain areas where the presidential ballot is higher than others. That's the question that is demonstrating. And what is it about? It's about scrutiny, it's about evidence, it's about a demonstration as to what could have explained those discrepancies. The point being, and this again was a 2017 issue, can there be a situation where a person goes into a ballot, into a polling station, and takes only a paper for the president, or takes only a paper for the MP, or takes only a paper for the governor, and votes and doesn't vote for the other? That's the question. And if that were to happen, wouldn't that be an incident that could be recorded somewhere where we say, yeah, so and so came here and said, I do not want this, so they were not given that?
Yeah.
So again, not to go into the issues that will be canvassed in the court, because we don't know. These are all issues in affidavits and so on. My point would be that the reason why that is an issue for determination is so that there's proof that there could be an unexplained variation. Because then you expect that whatever standards of people came in should be equal in terms of they had the same papers, and therefore they voted for the president, voted for the other positions. And even if they are spoiled, there is some relationship between those ones and the person voted. So I'm explaining it from where I'm sitting as a lawyer, that this is the issue that the Supreme Court is framing, and this is what the lawyers ought to address, whether in support of or opposed, or in opposition.
All right, Norman.
Just to add to what Martin has said, when you are looking at the votes cast for all the 6 positions, you are faced with the first question. What was the voter turnout on the election day? Okay, you're supposed to have a consistent voter turnout, okay, for the 6 positions, on the first assumption that everybody picked 6 ballot papers. Also, the voter turnout is gauged because you identify the people biometrically, and even where the biometrics did not work, you have accountability from the manual system. So it's easy to reconcile and have a standard voter turnout applying to all the 6 positions. So the question that raises interest in the issue the Supreme Court has framed is because at a cursory look on the evidence before the court, there are varying voter turnouts for the different electoral positions that were on the ballot on the 9th of August. That, I think, needs explanation on how it happened. Okay. This issue arose in 2017. And there is actually a protocol in law where a person comes and he wants to vote for the president only. He will declare. There is a form. He will be given, he will sign. Agents will countersign. Then he's given 6 ballots. He will cast for the president if that is his choice, and then drop the other ballots unmarked in the ballot boxes. They will be accounted for as invalid votes. So much so that at the end of the day, you are able to tabulate, you have those invalid votes that were not marked, and they tell you with the forms that were filled as an incidence form of a voter who did not want to participate in all the 6 elections.
Right.
So it should be a pretty easy question to reconcile.
Okay.
But which, from the forms Chebukati has founded on the portal, that question is unanswered. Yeah, it's a question that should be answered, and the commission should put that issue to rest, that we can have an election where we can account for all the ballots that were given and how many voters turned out on the election day. And the issue of turnout is critical in an election because it helps you in computing the constitutional threshold. If the voter turnout remains a moving target, attainment of the constitutional threshold also remains a moving target.
And what's interesting that as you said that, and I'm coming to you, Nyamu, is that, and perhaps you'll give your 30 seconds closing remarks on whether you're satisfied these grounds capture all the issues raised in all of the petitions. Because one of the prayers that was in the Azimio petition was around that the Constitution speaks about tabulation of all votes cast. The 2013 Supreme Court clarified to speak its valid votes cast, which is what informed how IBC conducted this election. However, Azimio was talking about all votes, including spoiled rejected, being included in the tabulation for especially the 50% plus one. That prayer is not here for consideration. Does that concern you?
I think also part of Ruto's opposition to the involvement of LSK as amicus is one of the issues the LSK is speaking to about 50+1 and computation of rejected votes when computing the constitutional.
So that might come under this ground of 50%
threshold.
plus
Yes.
threshold. Okay.
So the issues may not really capture everything that is contained in the petition, but I think they give us a fair chance of having many of the questions raised in the petition answered. And I think our Supreme Court has been evolving jurisprudence. If you compare 2013, 2017, it keeps getting better.
All right.
But I was going to tell you that it's captured under the issue of breaches and irregularities.
Yes, and also 50 plus one should cover it. Yes, sir. On the question we are discussing of the discrepancies, unexplained the prayer is between the presidential vote and what you saw the votes cast for governor and other positions.
I'll not speak for IBC or indeed anybody.
Please.
But
we will interrogate you.
But we also be alive to the fact that not because I would fear being interrogated. I cannot be interrogated. This is public.
You are free Kenyan here.
I'm a free Kenyan.
We need to wrap up. We
My
have 2
issue
minutes.
is this. Even as we look at those issues, let's also remember that in voting in prisons would entail voting for the president and not another position.
Voting what?
Prisons. Prisoners would vote. Prisoners would vote for president only and not another position.
That's not about prisoners.
So basically,
it's about counties.
If there's a substantial number, because
basically, those are factors to be considered, even as IBC explains.
Right.
I believe the other question that that you wanted addressed is
the spoiled votes, rejected
is a question
votes.
of whether valid votes are the ones that will be considered when determining whether 50% plus 1% has been attained.
That's what IBC used.
So basically, that's a question that will be looked at. But of course, in 2013, it is the valid votes cast that were considered.
Gentlemen, we've gone through about what? Let's see, 5 issues, not 5%. So the other 4 is IBC carried out verification, tallying declaration according to the Constitution, whether they declared President-elect William Ruto having met 50% plus 1 threshold, whether irregularities and illegalities that affected presidential election results, and also relief and orders that the court can grant. We definitely do not have time to go through all that. So I'll give you each 30 seconds. 30 strictly for your closing remarks, because I need to quickly then update our viewers what to expect from tomorrow. That is what you'll be seeing in court, how many lawyers for who and how much time they each will have. Martin, 30 seconds. Start
30
now.
seconds. One of them is a good friend of mine has told me that I asked Nyamu, why is it that Nairobi elections were not postponed? Because there were so many issues around Sakaja and his degree and so on, and yet the ballots came well. But that's a friend of mine who has asked me to ask you, so I've asked you because he's told me, but that did not respond. Basically, Sophie, from where we are sitting, I think that we have seen a lot of improvement in terms of how we are processing the petitions, the issues that are being raised. The quality of the petitions that have so far been submitted has been very high, whether you're looking at the Omtata petition, whether you're looking at the Raila petition, or you're looking at the youth advocacy and Peter Kirika one. So basically the quality has been very good.
Okay.
And I think that what the court has done this time around is to manage the processes so well as to distill the issues in an agreeable way and focus on them. For me, the issue is one. The principles of our electoral system as outlined in Article 81, supported by other issues around Article 10 and the role of IBC and so on. Did IBC conduct these elections in strict conformity to those principles? That's the issue. And all these other issues will be subservient to that. Because at the end of the day, if IBC say, if Chebukati says that he has a constitutional role to be a dictator, to decide what happens, then the courts will remind him, as reminded in my Nakiai case, that no, you are not just some guy who comes from somewhere. You are a creature of the Constitution.
All right, thank you. 30 seconds.
I started here in this station in 2017, and I said there was no presidential election on the 8th of August 2017. Sadly, I sit here today and dare say there was no presidential election in Kenya on the 9th of August 2017. 2022. The sad bit with this election, and which actually should pain every Kenyan, is that we have foreign interference in the manner in which we choose our commander-in-chief. It is a disturbing thing, and I think those who have facilitated such interference, the Supreme Court should be courageous enough to hand out recommendations that will lead to thorough investigations, prosecution. Because the Constitution says if you establish a government in a manner not provided for in law, you commit the highest crime of treason.
Yeah.
I live for that day that Chebukati faces that crime.
Well, to the extent of the CJ, I've been seeing a clip going around when she spoke on prayer day, the last one, and talked about smoking out those who may attempt to... We'll see what happens. Finally, 30 seconds.
Yes, I would say that at the end of the day, what would be important to us as a country, given that an election, a repeat election and all that, would be an exercise that would involve expense in terms of public funds, we would like to ascertain as to whether the irregularities, if any, irregularities and illegalities, if any, affected the results. And I would like to urge Kenyans, whenever we go to elections and seek to be elected, it is important that we employ and we have agents, so that we are no longer going to deal with speculation and hypothesis to determine whether or not there was free and fair elections.
Okay.
That's all that I would say, because there's provision for that. And now we are actually getting to the bush, throwing stones into the bush to see what is going to come out of that bush, as opposed to dealing with an ideal situation.
When a colleague says
an ideal situation where
we are talking about a process.
It's a process in the Supreme Court, and they have their right to seek justice.
There's a
10
right.
seconds.
There's a right to justice under Article 48 of the Constitution.
Let's
but in terms of election system, those are my views.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, you have been quite the panel this evening. I thank you for staying with us also from 8 p.m. to now. If we could request, I want to take through our viewers what we will be seeing from tomorrow. I think we have those graphics, representation directions. So the Supreme Court gave guidelines as to how council will represent the various parties, and there you go. So Raila Odinga, Martha Karua for council. So they may have a battery of lads. Remember, I think it was a 42-strong team. But in terms of who will be in court representing the two petitioners is just for counsel or advocates, if you like. IEBC equally 4. William Ruto and Rigathi Gachagua as respondents will get 4. Wafula Chebukati will get 1 cancel each. That's also for Juliana Cherera, Justus Nyangaya, Francis Wanderi, and Irene Masit. So each of the commissioners, including the chair, get 1 cancel each. Youth Advocacy Africa, Peter Kirika will have 2. Helef Halifa and others 2, David Karaoke 2, Okia Mtata. These are the other petitions. Remember, they've all been consolidated. So as opposed to the main petition, the lead petition, Raila Odinga, that has 4, these other ones are getting 2, which is a matter that was clarified today. Julius Nyokabi, as you can see on those graphics playing, beg your pardon, on your screen, get to LSK, Senior Bar Council, Attorney General, ICJ, and the Amici. Getting 1 cancel each. Amici is plural for amicus curiae. All right, so that's what you have in respect to the directions for representation that commences tomorrow when the trial begins. Then time allocation. This is very important because there's a strict timeline. By Monday, a decision must be rendered. So Raila Odinga, Martha Karua, 3 hours. The rest of all the petitioners I've mentioned are getting 30 minutes each. The 4 dissenting commissioners, 1 hour to be shared. So they figure out how they'll do that. IEBC and Chebukati have 3 hours. William Ruto and Rigathi, when it comes to response, 3 hours. Attorney General Kiara Karaoke, 30 minutes. And the amicus curiae or amici file written submissions. Strictly, they will not be speaking or oral submissions in court. So finally is to say that process commences tomorrow in terms of the actual hearing, 9 a.m. We'll have that live here on KTN News, so you want to stay put. So the whole day tomorrow we'll be seeing the submission, the petition, the case being made by the petitioners. They'll have the day to themselves. Then come Thursday, you get to hear from those who have been sued, the respondents. They get to defend their win, IEBC, their actions, at least the faction that supports the election of William Ruto. And towards the end of the day, remember the scrutiny we talked about earlier, the report of that scrutiny will be brought to court, and there will be deliberation on whether there should be submissions over the same. Finally, Friday, rejoinders. So the petitioners begin tomorrow, respondents, then the petitioners come back on Friday to be able to speak to what will have come out of the respondents. And then the judges retreat. Saturday, Sunday will not get any rest, and on Monday, that verdict. That's how it's going to flow from here. And he will be here every evening, 8 to this time, thereabouts, right? Keeping you up to date with how the Supreme Petition is panning out. I want to thank you all for being with us tonight, and also my guests here, Wilfred Nyamu, Norman Magaya, Martin Olo, Daktari. Nawashukuru sana kwa kuwa nasi. Hakuna cha ingine lakini next time. Have a good night. I'm Sophia Waduna.